Congo's Electoral Commission has postponed elections in 3 cities until March 2019. The cities affected are in the eastern part of the country, Beni and Butembo, and the western city of Yumbi. Elections will go ahead elsewhere this coming Sunday. This also comes in the wake of a call by the Electoral Board by opposition party candidates to deactivate SIM cards in voting machines to prevent the electronic transmission of the results.
Congo's Electoral Commission said on Wednesday that it was delaying Sunday's presidential and legislative elections in 3 cities until next March. This means that votes for those cities will not be taken into account in the presidential contest. Beni and Butembo in the east of DRC have been dealing with an Ebola outbreak since August, while Yumbi in the west, where more than 100 people were killed in ethnic violence last week. Leading opposition candidate Martin Fayulu had warned the Electoral Commission against any move to shelve voting in Beni and Butembo. In a tweet earlier today, he said using Ebola as an excuse to postpone the elections does not hold, as there were campaigns in the area. He alleges that this is a ploy to steal elections. The Electoral Commission in a statement confirmed that the elections will go ahead on Sunday as planned in the rest of the Central African nation. Final results for the presidential election will be announced on January the 15th, and the new president will be sworn in 3 days later. Meanwhile, opposition parties have urged mobile phone companies to disable SIM cards provided for voting machines as concerns grow about how the ballots of some 40 million people will be counted and shared. This vast Central African country, for the first time, is using voting machines as it chooses a successor to longtime President Joseph Kabila. The elections, which were originally meant to take place in 2016, have been repeatedly postponed, sparking violence. Lehana Tsotetsi, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Well, to help us take this story a little bit further and try and make sense of what this might mean, I'm now joined in studio by political analyst Dr. Charles Sinkala. Thanks very much for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Peter.
All right. Now, the last time we spoke, the elections had not yet been delayed, and they were due last weekend on the 23rd. Now they're due on the 30th, but this now twist in the tail. 3 cities are not going to be taking part. What does that mean?
It means very disappointing, you know, in terms of the people for the Democratic Republic of Congo, because you can't have an election part of the country. You know, those votes, whether there's only 1 city or 3 people, that matters in a democratic society, because those adds up to numbers. For instance, if somebody, the other second contender had 51%, and maybe the 2% for him to win those presidential elections was supposed to come from those elections. So as much as we preach for the free and fair elections, you know, when you talk about those technicalities, it's actually impossible to achieve that goal.
All right, but I suppose people might say that there are instances where, you know, things are beyond people's control. 2 of those cities hard hit by Ebola, and therefore could have compromised having elections there. And the third one, well, you know, we talk about political instability there. Will it affect the results if they wait until next year?
Of course. I mean, you know, we're talking about the Democratic Republic of Congo has got a very bad history in terms of power transition. You know, we've had the assassination of Mobutu Sese Seko Kukumbendo wa Zambanga, who was, you know, a leader there, not really Patrice Lumumba, succeeded by Mobutu, and also the assassination in 2001 of Laurent Kabila, you know, the father to the current caretaker president. You know, all these things has been accumulating. Also the delay by President Kabila, or caretaker president, if I have to address him properly, you know, because at the moment we don't have a president in the Democratic Republic of Congo, because the tenure for his office ended almost 3 years ago. You know, so these has also fueled the uncertainty in the country. We've got mass confusion, the warehouse being burnt of where they keep these electronic or voters registration equipment. Also, we've had a plane crash which was delivering equipment to one of the areas, which, you know, all these has accumulated, you know, to put the country in a very bad situation. You know, I know they've got pressure from the people or the international community as well, wants a lasting solution in Democratic Republic of Congo, that they hold the elections, but they've been planning for many years. You know, Kabila had known long before that he's not going to go for another term. He knew not only that, but he knew also that his term is going to come to an end. There must have been some preparations so that they make the use of all these technologies or equipments. If they have to teach people to use the electronic things which they have to introduce for the first time, you know. And not only that, we've had complaints from the Electoral Commission officials that they do not know, they haven't been fully trained on how to use the electronic equipments. And part of the country, or if most of it in the rural areas, they do not have electricity. These things, equipment has to be plugged in. So all these accumulate to a situation that it was supposed to be, you know, though we want the elections to be held immediately, but a postponement of a later day which is conducive so that everything is ready and free. You know, at the moment, I don't think they're free even to hold the elections.
So what does one do? I mean, you know, if you delay even further, that causes even more unrest and violence. But if you don't deliver a fair result, that might also cause violence. What do you do?
Peter, a delay of trying to achieve things to put in place so that Democratic Republic of Congo can be on the right track in terms of democracy in Africa, you know, will be costly, I understand, but it will be a meaningful and a best solution for the people, especially the people in the Democratic Republic of Congo who's been deprived of the justice of having this. It doesn't make sense to go into a fight when you're not ready to fight. Though those elections, they will be held this weekend, I mean, they will be disputed because of those flaws and whatever, so to be a back and forth. We see a situation where they will call another referendum of trying to say these elections were not fair because of certain cities did not participate. You know, so these are some of the things that as the leader of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Kabila, you know, should have heard immediately from the onset that he was advised by the SADC region. I think by that time we had the former president Jacob Zuma, who advised that, you know, a SADC community region can assist them in facilitating and getting their infrastructure in place. They denied, they refused that Democratic Republic of Congo, they are big enough to handle their internal problems. And, you know, we only hope that the people of Democratic Republic of Congo can have a fair election day so that they can participate fully.
So the opposition are calling for the deactivation of SIM cards. There seems to be a lot of concern about these voting machines. They want this to prevent electronic transmission of results. What are they scared of? Could there be manipulation that could take place?
Peter, there's no way you can introduce an iPhone to your 86-year-old grandmother. You understand how to use the touch screen. It has to take a gradual education for her to understand, because maybe she hasn't even used a cell phone before. Even a non-touchscreen phone would be difficult for her to use. So my view was early that they should have fused it in the earlier stage within the by-elections, during the time they have a dry run, so that people they can feel conversant. To them, the people of Congo, they realize that they're going to be robbed. They do not understand this. Already, Martin Fayulu, who is one of the leading opposition leader who's been nominated by the rest of opposition, he said they're going to jam the signals. They're calling for the telecommunication companies, to suspend the SIM cards. So if you talk about those situations, and also the Commission of Electoral Commission, they have insisted that we're only using the electronic devices for printing only, rather than accumulating the voters. So there's so much confusion there which hasn't been singled to one corner, so that they can sort out these differences, among the government, opposition, and the people at large.
All right, look, the elections are going to go ahead, that's for certain, we know this. but what can the AU and other regional bodies do to make sure that a desired outcome by the people of the DRC is what gets delivered after this election?
I think the international community, the AU, which is the mother body of the all African 55 states, has to re-strategize their approach in terms of advising the individual countries, because there is an element of sovereignty where they give power to the country to decide. They can only advise, but that does not do any meaningful to countries, any justice, because we've seen what has been happening across the African continent, and not only DRC, but in Central African Republic. We've got conflict, we've got also in South Sudan, we've got also in Nigeria, we've got the Boko Harams. Nigeria, they're going to elections in January, and all sorts of things which are happening, and I think they need to do more than just doing sanctions for the country. At the end of the day, they punish the citizens rather than the person who's perpetuating. But we must also not rely too much on the conflicts or the problem. We must understand where the conflicts are coming. We understand that in Africa, we've got conflicts and civil wars in all these mineral-rich and oil-rich countries. We need to find who's making the conflict into all this. Then we can boil down to the problem. Then we will solve our problems.
Dr. Sinkala, I have a feeling that we will be chatting a little bit more on this story as we count down to the elections this weekend. But thanks very much indeed for coming through on this day, sharing your insights.
Thank you very much, and compliments for the season.
Yes, compliments for the season to you too as well.